What would you do if your teammate lets you pass to help you and, at the end of the race, you ignore the orders to return it? That was exactly what happened between Hamilton and Leclerc in Baku. But what nobody expected was the way Hamilton responded to the scandal that Ferrari almost breaks from the inside. The Azerbaijan 2025 Grand Prix will be remembered as one of the most uncomfortable and revealing moments of Ferrari's new era. What was anticipated as a transition career, without great expectations in terms of podium positions, ended up undressing the structural cracks of a team that, in theory, had signed Lewis Hamilton to lead a rebirth. But what happened in Baku was the opposite. It was a scene of strategic lack of control, of operational confusion, and, above all, of a lack of alignment between the pilots and the wall. In the absence of a single round for the end, with modest but still valuable positions at stake, Ferrari executed a clear team order. Lewis had to return to Charles Leclerc the position that had given him turned back to try a joint offensive against the cars that preceded them. What seemed like a simple order became a rupture symbol. Hamilton received the instruction of his career engineer, Riccardo Adami, precisely and in sufficient time. Let Charles pass, there is 1.5 seconds behind you. This is the last round. It was an unambiguous message. But what followed was a partial, calculated, almost passive-aggressive execution. Hamilton lowered the rhythm, yes. He reduced the march in line, even stopped slightly. But not at the level that allowed Leclerc to reach and overcome the position, crossing the finish line just 464 thousandths from behind. That distance, so tiny, was a universe of tension between both pilots. The incident shook Maranello's structure not because of the result itself, an exchange between the 8th and 9th place, but for what it represented in the broader context. The arrival of a new figure with political, sports and media weight, which in its second career with the team, challenged a live directive without immediate consequence. The paddock burned immediately. Italian media talked about a silent betrayal. Former pilots and analysts argued whether it had been an ego sample or simply a calculation error. Internally, the communication channels within the team tensed. Leclerc said nothing on the radio that was heard on television, but in internal channels, his frustration was evident. And this scene was not the product of the chaos of the moment. It was the consequence of a series of accumulated decisions in time. From the freedom that Hamilton was granted in his contract, until the lack of tactical clarity in recent laps, through emotional management that did not anticipate that, for a world champion, the word team sometimes means something different. What happened in Baku is not anecdotal. It is a turning point, a symptom that Hamilton's integration in Ferrari will not be a soft transition, but a collision of cultures, styles, and priorities. And if it is not managed correctly, it can be the beginning of an internal crisis that drags the team out of the fight for the championship. But the most disturbing is not what happened. It is what this incident can trigger from now on. Doubts within the wall, reserves between the pilots, and, most dangerous, an invisible fracture that makes it impossible to build victories from cohesion. What happened after the checkered flag in Baku was not just a post-carrier reaction. It was a moment of definition. The way in which Lewis Hamilton decided to publicly face the incident with Charles Leclerc marked a turning point in his role within Ferrari. The easy thing would have been to evade the issue, or hide in the confusion of the end of the race. But he didn't. Lewis faced the microphones, the cameras, and above all, faced the moral burden of what he had done. He did not justify it arrogance. He did not appeal to his status of 7 times champion. He said, "It was a mistake. I will apologize to Charles." At the end of the day, it is only for P8 and P9. But the interesting thing is how that conclusion came. Because in your explanation there are more layers of what it seems to the naked eye. Hamilton explained that he received the message from his engineer too late, when he was already completely focused on the front car, still clinging to that remote possibility of winning a position. He said that, although the probability was minimal, his mind was in attack mode. That little detail reveals a lot about his mentality. Even in irrelevant positions for a champion like him, he still sees opportunities. And that competitive mentality that led him to the top is the same that dragged him to the center of the controversy. The fact that Hamilton raised his foot, that he tried to abide by the order without giving in all, suggests something more complex than a simple disobedience. It shows that there was an internal struggle between his competitor instinct and his obligation as a member of a team that is still learning to know. Hamilton's reaction, therefore, is a mixture of personal maturity and strategic calculation. Because behind each word there is an intention. And that intention in this case is to build trust. Strengthen its internal position as someone who can lead the change, not only on the track but in the culture of the team. Because Ferrari in this new stage does not only need a fast pilot. You need a team builder. And Hamilton seems to understand that this role is the one who must embrace. But that strategy also entails a risk, because an apology does not erase the damage. It does not change the fact that Leclerc felt that the rules were not respected. And he does not prevent the next team situation from Baku's memories will return strongly. What is at stake here is not just the reputation of a pilot. It is the emotional stability of a pair that, in theory, should complement each other, not compete silently. And on that board, each word counts. Each gesture. Each order fulfilled or ignored. Because in modern Formula One, the psychological game among classmates can make the difference between a champion team and one fractured inside. When the race ended in Baku, the entire paddock turned his attention to Lewis Hamilton. But in the shadow of the scandal, who truly remained in an awkward position was Charles Leclerc. His silence was not a sign of peace or acceptance. It was a form of resistance. A statement without screaming. In a world where each word is analyzed to the millimeter, its decision not to climb the conflict publicly was a more intelligent strategy than many believe. Because Charles, more than annoying for losing a position, was injured deep in what it means to be part of a team. For him, Formula One is more than speed. It is trust. And what happened in Baku broke a tacit code between teammates. Leclerc had obeyed the order to let Hamilton pass in an average stage of the race with the verbal and tactical promise that he would recover that position if the attempt to hunt the car forward failed. He not only trusted, he acted without resistance. But when the time for the reverse exchange came, he was ignored. Therefore, on the radio, his message was clear but poisoned. I don't really care, it's just for an 8th place, but it's not fair. Those words, formulated with apparent serenity, are an emotional bomb in a team like Ferrari. It was not points, it was principles. And what made Monegasco clear is that it was not the loss of the position that hurt, but the implicit betrayal. Subsequently, before the media, Leclerc showed again that unique ability to control the speech. He was a diplomat, even educated. He talked about, there are rules that we all know, and that he hopes that in the future they will work in another way. But behind those soft phrases, there is a strong message. It does not trust the current system. And in Ferrari, when a pilot begins to distrust the system, the alarms are lit. Because the problem for Ferrari is not just technical or strategic. It is internal. It's emotional. And that is the most dangerous. Because a team that has spent years rebuilding its identity cannot afford cracks in its nucleus. Leclerc represents continuity, Maranello's heart, the long-term project. Hamilton, meanwhile, is the impact figure, the short-term weapon, the name that should bring immediate glory. When these two energies collide, the risk is not just losing races. It is losing the cohesion that makes championships. Fred Vasseur knows it. Therefore, his subsequent statements were almost surgical measures. He explained that the strategy had logic, that Hamilton had an advantage of tires, that the exchange was justified. But what he did not say was more revealing. There was no direct criticism of Hamilton. There was no clear reaffirmation of the wall authority. And that, in a high-pressure context, can be interpreted as a sign of structural weakness. Ferrari's future will depend on how they handle this fracture. Because if it is left unsolved, it will become a fissure that widens with each race. Leclerc is too professional to make this an open war. But it is also too ambitious to let what happened as if it does not affect internal dynamics. If a pattern of favoritism or justified disobedience, the tension will cease to be subtle. That gesture, however small, changes all the perception of what this stage of his career can be. Because Ferrari is not just a team. It is an institution with a soul. And to earn a real place within it, it is not enough to be fast. You have to understand its culture, its history, its sensitivity. And Hamilton, who arrived as an outsider, has taken the first step to become an essential part of the red tissue. But this change does not occur in a vacuum. It occurs in the middle of a season where Ferrari faces gigantic challenges. The pressure to win is immense. The expectation of having two elite pilots living in harmony is high. And media attention to each movement is constant. In that environment, any error is amplified. Any gesture too. Therefore, Hamilton's response in Baku should not be analyzed only as an individual act, but as a message to the entire grille, to their engineers, to Leclerc, to fans, to the rivals. What he said and what he did was a statement of intentions, that he is committed, that is willing to adapt, and that he understands that this stage in Ferrari will be more emotionally demanding than any of his years in Mercedes.